This is about ultrasonics, and it's from Wilkins. It's just a little excerpt from chapter 42 on page 736 if you want to kind of look at the book. So, very long-term goals of therapy are accomplished through a blended approach. And what that approach is using both your instrumentation and also a Cavitron. There are some offices out there that only use the ultrasonic tip and they do not use instruments. There are some that don't use much of the Cavitron but use only instruments. And I'm saying that the book is saying that patients benefit from both, and truly you're going to find out that each between instruments and your ultrasonic, each do something the other doesn't do. You really need to have both. If you have a patient that comes in that has heavy calculus, you would be better off starting off with the Cavitron, and you knock a lot of that calculus off of there, and you can smooth an awful lot. But the thing is you after that, you need to go back in with your instruments and what they say fine scale. And there should be not as much calculus left after you have done an instrument or after you've done the Cavitron, at which point your instruments can really get into places and get some rough areas off that even the Cavitron, it's hard to maneuver. So this was introduced, ultrasonics, way back in the 50s. What it is that it's a power-driven scaling device is what an ultrasonic is, for those of you who have not been in the industry. This device converts high-frequency electrical energy into mechanical energy, and it does that in the form of very rapid vibrations. So that allows for really fast calculus removal, and it is much less hand fatigue for the clinician, and it's much less time in the chair for the patient, which they really like. So later, sonic scalers were developed that work on the same principle, but they use an air turbine as their energy source. So they're two different things. Ultrasonic and sonic scaling difference is their mode of action. And on the ultrasonic, the mechanical vibration, which we already said converted electrical energy into high frequency sound waves. And it's those sound waves that produce the vibrations at the end of the tip. And then cavitation. Cavitation is where the water comes in. The water meets the vibrating tip, and minute little bubbles are created, and they release energy. So there can be heat at the tip. So what the key is to good Cavitron or ultrasonic scaling is that you've got to maneuver your water flow in balance with the amount of energy, the amount of power that you're giving it, so that if you don't have enough water coming in for the where you have the power is much greater and you just have a little bit of water, that tip will get hot fast and the patient will feel it, and you'll kind of feel it on your fingers, even though when you're holding it there is a pad for you to hold on to, but you will feel the heat coming in, and so you know that it's off balance. We also use the ultrasonic for irrigation. It's a continual flushing out of the pocket and uses hydrodynamic waves. It has the water, and you have all of that vibration, and they call it a lavage, L-A-V-A-G-E. And when someone says, I just lavaged that pocket out, that's what they're meaning. They said they took a ultrasonic tip and with the water and the vibration just irrigated out the pocket. And sometimes when you have tissues that are just a little oh, they're a little loose, and you may not even have a lot of calculus down there, but just something that you just want to, they have like gingivitis, and you just want to irrigate the whole pocket out, and that's what that's good for. So there's the elements that ultrasonic uses is on the tip, and it is, you have an amplitude and a frequency. So an amplitude is the distance of the tip movement, and that is determined by the power. And what that means is you can have that tip moving when it's vibrating back and forth, or kind of elliptical, which would be in an oval. It is elliptical, or it can do linear, which is in a straight line. It would just be moving back and forth real quick, like to the right and to the left, and just in really fast, rapid movements. And it can move just a little bit, or you can set the power up higher to where it moves longer. That line is longer, or the elliptical circle is a little larger. And when you go lower on the power, then that closes, that line becomes smaller if it's linear. And if it's elliptical movement, if the tip is moving in like an oval, then the oval becomes smaller and smaller and smaller. So the higher power you go, the higher the oval gets, and the longer if it's a linear movement, like on a sonic or a piezo, not a sonic, but a piezo for sure, which is a different brand, it would just be a longer line. So that's the amplitude. The frequency is the speed of the movement, the speed of the tip. So it may be going like in a larger circle or a larger elliptical, but the actual movement of the tip, the vibrations on that circle is very high. It's like what's the number of cycles that it makes per minute, that it goes around in that higher elliptical. How fast is it going, or how slow is it going? So that's the frequency. Hey, sorry, I lost it for a minute. I'm trying to get this pin.
No need to apologize.
To work. That was Siri. Thanks a lot, Siri. Appreciate that. Okay. So elliptical, it moves around like this, and however many cycles per second that's going, if you have the power up, it goes really high like that. And then you have the power down low, it starts going in a smaller elliptical movement. Now the piezo just goes in a linear movement. It'll go back and forth, 25,000 or 50,000 cycles per second. So on a Cavitron or a magnetostrictive, it's going to be active. On that tip will be like this, and on the sides, it works on the tooth. If you just put the sides of these, or if you put the back or the face of it, it all works. All the sides are active and will help remove calculus. Now on the piezo, it moves back and forth, and only the lateral sides are active. So the back and the face do not work on that at all. So then you go to your sonic, that they came out for things that are, it's just not as much power, and it's not as fast, that they used for certain things. It only goes 2,500 to 7,000 cycles per second. It is elliptical in motion, so it will go kind of like an oval. Can't draw an oval with my mouse. But all sides are active as well. So those are the same there. As the Cavitron that we use, it just goes a lot less cycles per second. Sonics are something that you may have at your office. Most everybody either will have one of these two ultrasonics, either a magnetostrictive or piezo. And like I say, we have both at the office, and you'll have experience with both. So these are the types, like we said, magnetostrictive or piezo electric. So here is the stack. This is the magnetostrictive stack. This is called a Cavitron insert or a magnetostrictive insert. And all this part is going to be covered up with water inside a handle. And this stack, we don't ever touch by the stack. What the stack is thin little metal strips like this that are all pushed together. And so you can see on the sides, when we go into the clinic, you can see on the sides that there's ridges. That's where all those stacks are pressed together so that they stay that way. Then there's an O-ring. Always have an O-ring. Then there's a grip to where you can hold, and you should hold it by this grip, not the tip and not the stack. This bends pretty easily, and if you drop it, this will, even if it just bends a little bit, and it will bend, it ruins the whole thing. They're quite expensive, anywhere from like in 180 to 250 or more, depending on what kind of tip you get. And so when these, if you take them out of the autoclave and just throw them on the counter, they can, if they hit a certain way, they can bend that stack a little bit, and it will ruin your tip. So you have to be really delicate with these tips, and hold it only by the grip when you're taking them in and out of that bag, the sterilizer bag, or putting it in your Cavitron or magnetostrictive or even the piezo handles. So here's your tip, and the point of the tip, you never ever put the point of the tip directly on the face of a tooth, because it will, you can put the sides or the back or the face of it on an enamel, but you don't put the actual point just dead on enamel or root or anything else. It can do a lot of damage. However, what it's meant to do is to vibrate and shatter calculus. So you can't, if there's a big piece of calculus right here, you can put the tip directly on the calculus and just kind of move it up and down in contact with it, and then not lift it off and on and off and on, and it will begin to shatter this calculus, and the big pieces just move away, and then you can use the sides or the back or the front to go across the tooth and get the remainder pieces of it off. So the magnetostrictive ultrasonic scalers, its composition is it's a stack of metal strips. It vibrates in the tip. That's the activation. The motion of the tip is elliptical pattern. All surfaces are active. And the tip shape, if you cut it in cross section, would be round. It's for supra and sub calculus. You can get a lot of stains off, not all stains. Like that black line stain, which they liken to calculus. It's very difficult to get, use a Cavitron to get that off. You really need a hand instrument, the toe of a hand instrument. It is for if you have endotoxins, biofilm down in a pocket and you're wanting to lavage it out, that's good for that. Furcations, if you have a furcation, it's really good to go deep down into the furcation, and then you can clean that out. Sometimes where you cannot really do the same kind of thing with your instrument. Then you have an initial debridement, to where if you have someone with so much calculus and you are going to just get the big rough pieces off and have them come back to do the fine tuning of it, then that's really good to use the ultrasonic for that. So overhangs, it's really nice to be able to remove overhangs, and orthodontic treatment. Orthodontic treatment, it works great to get biofilm and calculus off of brackets, ortho brackets. So contraindications, when would we not opt to use an ultrasonic? Any kind of a communicable disease that someone has that you know of, you would not use it for the aerosols. Tuberculosis, you would not use it. They may ask that in a question, but obviously if someone has active tuberculosis, they're not even going to be in your chair. They're going to be secluded off at in some kind of other facility. Pulmonary disease, lung disease, that is, for the aerosols. If they have a pacemaker, they always thought that a pacemaker, in the ultrasonic vibrations interferes with the pacemaker. Nowadays, they make pacemakers with a certain coating around them. So often we can go ahead and use Cavitron on a pacemaker patient. If someone has an autoimmune disease, kidney, respiratory issues, COPD, uncontrolled diabetes diseases, or other organ transplants, we would not want to use this aerosol on them. If they have demineralized areas, a lot of white or dark demineralized areas on the enamel, we would want to be really careful and not kind of skip over those parts with the Cavitron. They might just cave them in. If you have exposed dentin, someone has recession and they have exposed dentin out there, you don't want it to do that. And if the person has swallowing difficulties, some people that have a gag reflex and have a problem with swallowing because it throws a lot of water. Of course, with the use of the high power vac, then we don't have to worry so much about the swallowing issues as we once did when we just used the normal vac system. Children, you don't use it on primary or newly erupted teeth. It's much too strong. Kids have very large pulp chambers. You can see that in radiographs. And so it's closer to the surface and it can be much more sensitive. Precautions, you can give some damage to restorations. It could remove the glaze of porcelain off of a porcelain crown and create little minute pores on the surface. Amalgam, silver fillings, it may cause scratches and loss of material and create little pores. Implants, damage to titanium surfaces. Implants are made, they have titanium on the, and it gets scratches really easily to metal instruments. So they have a certain kind of implant tip that we use that has a little plastic cover on the outside, and it's designed specifically for use with implants and covered with that plastic tip. They also now make titanium ended tips that would be fine with those if your office happens to have. So the tip design or insert design, there's different sizes and widths of the actual tip. You have a conventional or standard tip. It's for heavy supra, very shallow sub. Periodontal or narrow profile tip is suited for sub. You have a plastic or carbon composite tip. You either have a straight tip or contra-angled. And a contra-angle just means that it has some kind of a curvature, just like your instruments. If it has more than one curve in it, it would be contra-angled. And of course you have your water delivery. So here's an example of some of the tips. This is called a beaver tail tip. It's big wide, and where that would be good for is if you have a big huge ledge of calculus covering all of the lower anteriors. This would be really great to kind of push it off. So this might be a good time to go ahead and tell you that a Cavitron works the exact opposite way that an instrument does. When you use your curettes, your scalers, any kind of hand instrument, you go below, you know how you do your get ready position, and you go to the distal line angle of a tooth, and then you insert it and you let it fall to the, like over the calculus to the bottom of the pocket. And when you're slightly coming up is when you should feel the bottom of that calculus. Then you latch on and you use your fulcrum. Sorry about that. You use your fulcrum to pull it off, and your wrist movement to go ahead and pull, but you're working from the bottom and you pull up. So a Cavitron works the opposite way. You start at the top, like the super part of the calculus, and you work your way down. So the reason is because as you're working, it's meant to shatter. So you can shatter it as you're going down underneath to the sub. So that's exactly how that works. Of course, when you have a patient that needs this, you review the medical history. We like to always do a systematic sequence when we are removing calculus with a Cavitron. So you're going to complete one quadrant before starting another, each tooth to completion, and then you go to the next tooth, just like we're going to be doing with hand instruments. So we use personal protective equipment, obviously, for our infection control. With this, we need to wear an N95 mask with a level 2 mask on top of the N95 mask. Okay, so it's a lot, but that's what we do to help to be able to use aerosol at all during COVID-19 times. This is what we have to do. So when we did not have to use an N95 mask before COVID-19 came about, but now we do. So you'll be putting on, and you'll be given an N95 mask, and we'll talk about that in clinic. So you're going to flush the water lines, and if for any kind of a board's test or question, you're going to say 2 to 3 minutes. But in our clinic, you only have to flush the water line of a Cavitron unit for 30 seconds because we have that flow. You must use the high volume evac, and always, and then the Magnetostrictive thin inserts on low to medium power. And that's a lot of times where we will start. We won't use the high power on this unless we use what we call a gold tip, and you'll be introduced to that at a later date. So the risk of exposure to dental personnel through aerosol with a Cavitron on is up to 20 feet of a treatment area, which is the only reasons that we were able to use the Cavitron at all after COVID. Well, at first we couldn't use the Cavitron at all, and they had to hand scale no matter what kind of a case they had. But then finally, when they started to loosen up, as long as we got those machines that are in our office, each operatory, and we used the high vac and an N95 mask with a level 2 on top of it, then we were okay to go ahead and use the ultrasonic, and you'll be really happy for that. So the biofilm, of course, forms on all internal surfaces of dental tubing. And so that's why we need to flush water for at least 20 to 30 seconds between patients. Even when you get to a point in later terms where you have 2 patients in a 6-hour period, you will, and you have basically 3 hours each per patient, you will be flushing 20 to 30 seconds, and we'll show you how to do that. Flush for 30 seconds before sterile insert is placed even in the handpiece to begin with. Consistent use on low power. You do need to use a higher power at certain points. We'll show you that. If you just only use the lower power on heavy calculus, all you'll be doing is burnishing calculus, which making the outer coating really smooth, because a lower power with a lower power insert is not going to be maybe strong enough to get all types of calculus off. So then what we need to do is switch to medium tip, and our medium tip is blue and our lower powered tip is green. In each package that you're going to see a green tip and a blue tip. So power and water connections, flush lines, and to fill the unit handpiece with water before you put the Cavitron in, and we'll be showing you that, of course, in the clinic as well. So you're going to select the type of insert that you want. You're going to set the power level. Calculus medium should be on medium to high if you have a lot of calculus, and biofilm should be on low to medium. So you're going to adjust the water, and then you have use of antimicrobial solution. So you're going to review the health history, explain the procedure, provide protection for the patient. So we always do a pre-procedural rinse. We position the patient, make sure that they're breathing okay. Use pain control if we need to, give them anesthetic if they need. We'll be doing that for you at the beginning, and have a control of the water. You grasp it like a modified pin grasp, just like you do with your instruments. Your fulcrum should be very gentle. You use the side of the tip on the tooth unless you are on a big mound of calculus. Then you can use the tip, but as the calculus is breaking up and you're getting closer to the enamel, then you move to the side of the tip, kind of like you do your instruments. So you always keep it moving. It should be moving all the time. With that vibration and water coming out, you should not be leaving it in a static position on the tooth. You could create a lot of damage to the pulp. So you're going to manual scale afterwards, and you're going to evaluate with your Explorer if you got everything off the tooth. So only the last 2 to 3 millimeters of any kind of an insert tip is what's actually removing the calculus. So all this part up here is not removing anything that this is touching. Only from here down is removing it. So the last couple millimeters, just like when you're using your instruments and we say go to the toe of the instrument, here's the toe of the insert, and just the last 2 to 3 millimeters. Even though all of this is in contact with the tooth, so that this tip, you always want that 2 to 3 millimeters of the tip always in touch with the side of the tooth. Because if your eye is looking at this part, as you hit this curve, you're going to make that with the tooth, and then the tip is going to go off into the tissue that way, and you don't want that. So you want the tip. If the tip is always on the tooth, none of this is going to do any damage to the tissue or the tooth. It's just this part. So you constantly move the tip in a slow to moderate pace. Do not place the tip perpendicular to the surface of the tooth. We already talked about that, where it's hitting it, at a 90-degree angle. you want to use the side of the tip. You use a really light, feather-light touch. It's not like your instruments where once you hook on to, you feel a piece of calculus, that you are going to put pressure. The more pressure that you put on this, it stops these vibrations. Okay, so if it stops because you're going to put pressure on it, it's going to go into the calculus. If there was a big mound of calculus here, it's going to go into that. And if you embed that in here, then it just stops the vibration. So nothing is working as it should. So we want this in constant motion. We're just constantly, and you can see that better in person. Not too rapid and not too slow, just a nice, comfortable pace. So troubleshooting, there's tip wear. Those tips can wear down, and we have certain cards that we'll show you as well. That if it's not working well, the tip, you're using a tip and it's the proper tip for the type of calculus you have, and it's just not doing anything, then it may be that the tip is worn down. Nothing lasts forever. So we have these little cards that you can, you'll be able to tell if the tip is worn down. And I think maybe it will tell me in here, and I might have this wrong, but I'm pretty sure that for every like millimeter that wears off the end of a tip, cuts your efficiency by 50%. So your Cavitron, you're working a lot harder with the Cavitron than needs to be. So that's when and you can't repair those tips. Once they wear off, we have to discard the whole entire tip and order new ones. So make sure that you're adapting that correctly to the tooth. Make sure your stroke is not too rapid. Maybe you have inadequate coverage. Sometimes people go over a tooth basically like this. And so they're missing all of the middle parts here and here and here. So it's just like an instrument that you need to kind of overlap. And you're going to overlap this. Come back here, overlap it like this, overlap it like this, all the way across the tooth. So that you're covering the whole thing and not just random pieces. So tip pressure should be very light. And this is just you're going to check if their patient needs a pre-med, of course, before you even begin. Pre-procedural rinse. Describe the procedure to the patient. Request hearing impaired patient turns off their hearing aid. Very often you have this when you go back, start on the upper right or upper left back molars. It's super close to their eardrum, and so that vibration, if they have a hearing aid, can really not feel very good. So if you know that they have hearing aids, you need to ask them to turn it off. Always safety glasses. Patient needs to breathe through their nose. So if they're completely congested and they are having troubles that way, this would not be a good day to pick to use the Cavitron on them. They need to be able to breathe through their nose because you're going to have their mouth completely open, and water's going to be all in there, so you don't want them to breathe through the mouth either. So, and always use, of course, local anesthetic if you think that they're hurting in any way, shape, or form. This is just the last slide. Once again, this is a perio retriever. You have different types that are, this is a contra-angled tip. This is a contra-angled tip. It has more than one angle. This is maybe one of those tips break off, and then you have this that will go down in there. It's magnetized, and it can hopefully bring the tip back out. And that's it. Most of this you will learn in the clinic and pick up on it pretty fast. Also, we'll want you to watch a video YouTube that will be pretty quick on how to do that.